But one of the things we have to keep in mind is that somewhere down the road, those combustion turbines will also be ready to retire. Our job is to look into what are the best options for independence, what are the pluses and minuses, and then present those to you, the council, so that that decision can be made. We need to already have something in place, or whether that's additional capacity, whether that's in-house generation, but we will work closely with the council in that, helping to determine what that best step is. What is the best combination to meet the needs of independence both now and into the future?
IPL staff have started working on assembling a request for proposals that we can send out to bid. Fortunately, with Southwest Power Pool's backlog on transmission studies, we have to replace, in order to take advantage of the short time frame, we would have to replace the capacity at the locations that they're currently at, and we're limited to that total capacity that's been approved for those locations.
The intent is to have the RFP ready to release by the 1st of September.
As it says there, electricity must always be made available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. Your revenue is based on how much you sell. But regardless of how much or how little, you still have to provide that service to every single customer.
Based on the input that we've got from the engineers, we expect to have the RFP ready to release here within the next 2 weeks.
Well, one of the things I'm working on is a presentation that will show kind of a timeline of all of our assets, when they drop off, what that does to our capacity requirement, and show kind of what options we have to fit all of those pieces together. So the recommendation from staff is that we get the LOI approved by council, and that we march forward with the process, negotiating with Pro Energy, and then come back to the PUAB and council with an actual contract here in the weeks ahead.
We're asking for a letter of intent that we can use to work with Pro Energy to kind of provide some leverage to get the details of the contract worked out.
So we've been moving forward with Pro Energy, and we have arranged to have the IPL will host a town hall style meeting at the Truman Memorial Building. Well, good evening, and welcome to our town hall meeting. There'll be a bonus question at the end of the night for how many different ties I wore in that montage. Yeah, seriously, we're glad you're here. We wanted to take the opportunity to address the questions that the public has about our proposal for new generation here in Independence. And over the last 18 months, you've heard more than enough from me, so we brought in some partners from within the industry to help us with tonight's presentation and the questions and answers. Immediately to my right here, John Twitty, the current president of the Missouri Public Utility Alliance, is going to be our moderator for this evening. John, if you'd like to introduce yourself, a little bit about your background.
Yeah, I'm the guy right there. I'm John Twitty. As Jim just said, the president and CEO of the Missouri Public Utility Alliance. And MPUA is an organization that serves the needs of about 120 hometown utilities, just like Independence Power and Light, around Missouri, some in Arkansas, a couple in Illinois, one in Mississippi, one in Nebraska. We do power supply. We are a wholesale power supply for many of our members. We're a wholesale natural gas supplier for some of our members. We are the state association that does advocacy work in Jefferson City. And we're delighted to be here tonight. I'm joined by Rebecca Atkins and Ewell Lawson over here, who will answer any difficult questions that I cannot. And we just appreciate the opportunity to come and help spread this message. Jim, thanks.
Next, we have Power Engineers. Power Engineers has been our consultant throughout this process, helping us with identifying resources, looking at evaluating technologies, and I'll let them introduce themselves.
Thanks, Jim. Hello, everybody. My name's Joe Bondak. I'm a senior project manager at Power Engineers. I've been working in the utility industry for 30 plus years as a consultant, seen shifts in technologies and types of installations throughout my career. And so pleasure to be here tonight. I am an electrical engineer by training, and just through years of experience, and now I'm a senior project manager. But to my right is Chris Falick. I'll let Chris introduce himself. He's also with Power Engineers.
Hey, good evening. I'm Chris Falick, Senior Mechanical Engineer for Power Engineers. I've been working in the industry for over 15 years. I've dealt with both fossil fuel and renewable energy projects and been involved from conceptual phases all the way through some field assignments where I've been out commissioning and constructing the power plants.
And then finally, at the other end of the table there, the company that submitted the lowest cost bid for all the proposals that we reviewed was Pro Energy Services out of Sedalia, Missouri. And glad to have you all here with us. I'd like to introduce yourselves.
Krista Lowe. I'm with Pro Energy. I'm a chief of staff for that organization. Thank you for having us, Landon and I. I usually only get to come over here for Santa Caligon days, so I'm excited to be here tonight. We really wanted to make sure that we were here to answer questions, to talk about the technology, and to let you guys know we're having this conversation in almost every state in the United States. They're trying to solve the same problem with the same sort of challenges that the City of Independence is. We're looking forward to helping the best outcome. So thanks for having us.
And I'm Landon Tessmer, also with Pro Energy. I'm a mechanical engineer by trade. I work in our proposal and commercial group, so I was a part of the team that actually estimated the project and worked to scope the project with the IPL team. I'm excited to be here. These types of discussions around the energy transition and the need for power that facilitates renewable growth within the industry, these are the types of things I talk about with my family and friends on a daily basis, probably more than they'd like me to. And now I've actually been asked to answer some questions on the subject, so I'm excited about that. Appreciate everyone showing up tonight.
I mean, as I said before, y'all have heard enough from me. We're not doing a presentation. There have been plenty of those, and our communications team put together that montage of just some of the key points that we've had over the last discussions over the last year and a half. But I would like our partners here to give us a little bit of an introduction of their role in the project and their background. So I'll turn it over to Power Engineers for their presentation.
Okay, this is going to be pretty short, but what I wanted to go over tonight was Power Engineers' role on what we've been supporting IPL with so far. Real quickly, we'll go over who we are. If you don't know who Power Engineers is, just one slide on who we are, and then other slides on what our role was in this process, and then finally a slide on like Landon mentioned a minute ago, other utilities that are going through the same things that you guys are going through. Some examples of some other projects that are very similar in size and in location to the City of Independence and very similar projects, if that gives anybody any reassurance. Power Engineers has been around since 1976. It was an Idaho-based firm. I am formerly a SIGA employee. SIGA was based in Overland Park for many, many years. We were acquired by Power 5 years ago, as we've been part of the Power group. There's over 3,000 employees within Power. And the point of this slide is really we have over 1,600 engineers and scientists in the Power, that are pretty much dedicated to the power industry, both from engineering and environmental standpoints, just dedicated to energy. I'd like to state that we do have an Overland Park office, formerly SIGA, and so Chris and I are both Kansas City area residents, and so the City of Independence is really just, part of our extended community, if you will. And so we're very interested in what happens locally. Next slide, please. Our role throughout this process was, as Jim mentioned, there was a an interest in putting out a request for a proposal to bidders. And when we were approached by City of Independence, the breadth of the RFP was pretty vast. It was let's consider all generation sources from hydro to BESS to solar to wind to traditional gas sources. Let's get proposals from everybody. And so our initial reaction was can we narrow the scope somehow. And as Jim has mentioned, there was an opportunity with this SPP replacement opportunity versus getting in the queue and waiting 4.5 to 5 years, for the transmission studies to be performed. There is an opportunity to replace some generation at one of the existing sites. And so our role was really to look at existing sites and evaluate the different technologies that are out there. And try to, somehow we came up with a number of 108 megawatts, and I shouldn't say somehow, I know how we came up with it, but we came up with a number of 108 megawatts was kind of our target replacement megawatt rating. And so we looked at subs A, H, I, and J as possible places to put any one of those new technologies, and quickly eliminated, some such as wind and solar require so much footprint, and so automatically they were eliminated in some cases. Battery energy storage was looked at pretty heavily in the beginning, and again, to get to the megawatt ratings that we're looking at for capacity, it just wasn't the right fit. And so the RFP quickly evolved to what we feel is the best options at this point, based on the available real estate that you have and considering other environmental factors, footprint considerations, infrastructure considerations, such as at these sites, is there water, is there fuel, is there wastewater streams, is all this, what is the best site for, the least amount of cost. And so we did a lot of tables and comparisons and evaluated it out such that it turned out that we thought sub A was the best location, and that Aeroderivatives got, for the cost and all the performance characteristics, was probably one of the best options. And so we recommended to IPL that an RFP be put together that not only look for aeroderivatives but also look for recip engines, because quite frankly, I think the other technologies didn't pan out or didn't evaluate out. Now, the good thing about some of these gas-driven engines is that they are being tested for the future. They are being tested for hydrogen, and that is potential future fuel that everybody hears about. And so, given all those considerations, we ended up writing the RFP for primarily for any kind of gas engine. If you don't mind, next slide, please. And so the RFP, was a process of coordinating with IPL staff and putting together a bid document that addressed everything from a bid form such that they fill out, the bidders fill out what they're proposing, the performance characteristics, they fill out the capital cost, of course, the O&M characteristics, the costs. And so it was a pretty daunting task to evaluate all the different performance numbers, as well as the capital costs and the O&M costs, and coming up with a best best fit recommendation. We did a net present value analysis that steered us toward the Pro Energy proposal, and that's kind of was how the process went. This final slide from Power Engineers is an example of other familiar utilities in our region they're doing something similar to what City of Independence is doing. Now, some of these megawatt ratings are a little bit bigger, but Associated Electric, down in southern Missouri, they're in the SPP market or in the SPP RTO, and they're currently writing specs for a 500 megawatt gas plant. They haven't started construction yet, but they have hired the engineer, and they are currently on board with putting in a new 500 megawatt gas plant. Simple cycle. OPPD is in the process of backing up 500 megawatts of solar that they just put in with 400 megawatts of natural gas. There's others like Shell. I know residents probably don't care about Shell, but in Texas they're doing the same thing. There's you know, with the environmental challenges that have gone on, and you know, the polar vortexes and the freeze events, people are getting back on board with gas as a dispatchable source. SRP, Arizona, 2 LM6000s, Xcel Energy, you know, 2 by 400 megawatt peaker plants. They were going for bigger, but they got shut down by the regulatory authority, and so they're going for smaller units. And again, the whole intent of this slide is that you're not alone with people maybe going in this direction. That's it for me.
And pass it on down to Pro Energy.
Move around a little bit. I hope that's all right. Is this working? Oh, yes. Thank you. All right, thank you. Why do you push it out for me? Thank you. Okay, so again, we're with Pro Energy. We're currently the vendor of the proposal that they're considering for the solution here in Independence. And we've kind of all said the same thing, right? This is happening in a lot of locations, in a lot of states. They're trying to solve this problem. When we got involved with Independence, we were looking at some very specific criteria for what we wanted to bid. And I think some of those things are really important to you folks. And that was grid resiliency. We know what happened in Texas a year and a half ago. I was lucky enough to be in Texas when that happened. It was a very odd sensation to have no power and not have power for a long period of time and not be able to do something about it. The other criteria were cost efficiency. You can't end up with a higher rate base than you have today with this solution. And the facilitation of renewable energy. I talked to a couple folks ahead of time, and they're the same agenda we have, which is we can't get there fast enough with zero carbon, minimal carbon alternatives for all of our power sources. However, you can't just flip that switch overnight. So navigating the transition in this state, in the state of Missouri, one of the things I wanted to point out was that, can you go to that graph? I'm sorry, I went down, thank you. Look at the coal-fired line, it's the one in the middle. That's current coal online in the state of Missouri, creating base-loaded energy. The very bottom one is non-hydroelectric renewables. So that means wind and solar. That gap we're looking at is the thing we're trying to solve for in the interim while we're getting some of that renewable power on the line. So think about that gap when we're thinking about a solution. Go ahead. So this is a slide we brought. This is California. This slide came out in 2016. It was part of what hinged our business for making a shift to peaking power, backup power, solutions for renewable power. As you know, the West Coast is ahead of us in terms of their commitment to moving toward renewable power. They're estimating 25% of their power is currently coming from wind and solar. But what you're looking at here is demand curve. It's probably pretty familiar to a lot of you folks. And you can see as the 24 hours of the day pass, the demand for power changes. So here it is from a base load capacity and a peaking capacity demand on the left-hand side. And on the right-hand side is the net demand. So what we're really thinking about is that duck curve on the far side. That's the grid trying to recover for the big demand that happens around 4:30, 5 o'clock every day when we get home and start running all of our power stuff. And the ability to recover for that. And as you can see, the big demand peak as it moves up is also as our renewables start to fall off. So the wind starts to slow down in the afternoons very often, and obviously the sun's starting to set and it's getting further away from our solar panels. So that curve is the thing we're trying to solve for. When we talk about fast starting power, we're talking about something that can be turned on quickly, move to the grid. Our turbines happen to start in less than 10 minutes. We run them for remote op centers right now, and our start times are averaging between 5 and 6 minutes. So when the grid calls them up, they turn them on, they start them, they run only for the period of time they're needed. So from a fuel standpoint, they're extremely efficient. Thank you. Next one. The other thing I wanted to point out is that as we made the shift to answer this call in the question of how we're going to get this peaker power online, we shifted our business a little bit. This is us. We're in Sedalia, Missouri. That's where our headquarters are. This is all of us standing in one of our plants down in Texas, a plant that we recently put online. And I think it's important to know that these subject matter experts, most of them have spent their whole career working on this particular technology, the LM6000, the fast start peaking power aeroderivative technology. And as we shifted in 2018 to really focus on this and start to help utilities solve this problem, our focus became 100% behind this technology. So our plant over in Missouri, if you'll hit one more, this is an overview of our campus. We've been building on this campus since 2008. We've been in business since 2002. If you don't know our CEO, he was born in Marshall, Missouri. So he's local to mid-Missouri. We felt like this was the right place to put up our location, to take advantage of the great workforce that's available here in mid-Missouri. And this is our acreage. We sit on about 90 acres in Sedalia, and we have about 1 million square foot under roof. So we're committed. This is what we do all day, every day. It's the technology that we're invested in, and we are going out and solving this same problem really across the United States. We're your neighbors. Happy to have you guys come down and have a look at us. And I think it's important to know that we're certainly available, and we love the idea of being able to come, 1 hour down the road and work on this for independence. So with that, Landon's going to take away. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Krista. I can take this, Jim. So I'm going to pick up where Krista left off. She mentioned we focused our business in 2018 on this particular technology. It was a very deliberate decision, and it's us anticipating what was happening in the industry. A lot of it was looking to the West Coast and seeing some of the challenges they were facing as they continued to bring online more and more renewables. What were some of the challenges they were facing? And we decided as a business, we want to be a part of the solution to that challenge. We want to be an enabler to continue to add wind and solar to the grid. So just looking at a few of the other options that can be considered when we talk about dispatchable power. The first one that often comes to mind for people is, why don't you just use what you already have installed? So if you've got a plant that's running on gas today, or coal or diesel, why not just run it in that fashion? Stop and start it when you need it. And frankly, a lot of utility companies decided to do that many years ago, and today are facing some acute challenges associated with that decision. So a base-loaded plant is one that's designed to come online and stay online for 24 hours. Typically, that means it has lots of thick pressure parts inside of it, and when you start and stop it, those pressure parts undergo a lot of stress. And so stopping and starting something that was designed to run continuously creates a lot of stress in the system, and it turns into a lot of maintenance. And so what was viewed as a free solution, because you're utilizing an asset you already have online, becomes a very costly solution when you're trying to maintain that and keep up with the duty that's required with stop and start. So that's one of the limitations in leveraging what's already been installed and asking it to stop and start. The next is transmission build out. So that's another great way to smooth out that curve that Krista showed. There's projects all over the United States right now that are focused on exactly this. Why not connect an area where the wind is blowing to an area where the wind is not? And so it allows you to leverage that renewable power in, say, Wyoming, and build a transmission line all the way out to California that can accommodate when they need it there. And so in theory, I think that's an excellent solution to the problem. The challenge is the permitting required to support that transmission build out is very time consuming. You cross a lot of state lines, you cross a lot of geography, and each geography is unique in terms of what's required to permit that transmission line. So it's very time consuming. The other is it's costly. On average, transmission build out is roughly $1,000 a kilowatt. It can get up to that high. And in building that transmission line, you haven't actually added any generation, you're only sharing the generation. So there's been a number of studies that have cited if the United States was perfectly interconnected, if you could interconnect the whole United States so that you could share power across the entire country, there's still an additional 20% surplus that's required to be met by something that can turn on and off to accommodate those peaks. So each of these that I'm putting up, don't get me wrong, they're all a part of the solution. I think when we look at the energy transition, each of these plays a role in that energy transition. Energy storage. Joe mentioned BESS, battery energy storage systems. They've come a long way in the last few years. They continue to get more and more cost competitive. Today, large utility scale battery storage is sold in really two lengths of duration in terms of how much you can store and discharge. 2 hours and 4 hours is essentially where batteries are at today. Some of the considerations you have to consider with battery storage is the space, as Joe mentioned. The other is consider what is the resource that is charging the batteries. So Krista mentioned today Missouri is predominantly coal. And so when you choose to add a battery storage system, if you're doing it with the intent of reducing the carbon footprint for the energy you're getting from it, you have to consider what is charging that battery. And so an ideal solution is to co-locate a renewable resource with battery storage so you can control what is storing, what energy is feeding into that battery. But again, now you're running into a scenario where you're adding costs to add generation and you require a tremendous amount of space to do so. So on average right now, based on the 2021 EIA reports, solar and storage co-located in one location is roughly $1,700 per kilowatt. And I think later tonight we'll probably talk about cost points and that might start to make more sense. But to put it into perspective, the plant that we've proposed for IPL is less than half of that. So why these gas turbines that we're talking about? Why aeroderivatives? It's because they can support that transition to renewables. So as Krista mentioned, when wind stops blowing or sun stops shining, the ability to dispatch something quickly. These gas turbines address a lot of the concerns that these other technologies we've looked at, but they're also so important in terms of enabling future renewable additions. I talk to utility companies every single day trying to help them manage that problem. Every utility company has a slightly different rule of thumb in terms of what they expect for how much dispatchable generation, that means something you can stop and start, like a gas-fired gas turbine. How much of that do you need for every megawatt of wind you put online? And it depends which utility you ask, but most use a general rule of thumb, somewhere between 1 to 1, saying if you install a megawatt of wind, you need a megawatt of dispatchable generation to back it up. Some have gotten as high as 3, saying for every megawatt of gas you install, you facilitate the introduction of 3 megawatts of renewables. So this is a part of the transition. This is how we get there. Gas-fired generation in terms of carbon content is roughly half the content as coal too. So when we view this as a transitional technology, that's an important thing to consider in the state of Missouri, considering what generation is available today. Being able to cut those emissions in half, it means you're not using coal in that particular case, or you're not using a diesel-fired gas turbine. You're using a fuel that burns at half the emission rate. The specific technology that's been mentioned a few times tonight is the LM6000. We've also heard the word aeroderivative. What aeroderivative means is that this was a gas turbine originally designed for on the wing of an airplane. So if you've been on a 747, you actually know what an LM6000 is. So the core of the gas turbine that we've proposed for the project and has been deployed all over the world for the same purpose, the core of that is the aircraft engine that sits on the 747. It has an output that can accommodate roughly 40,500 homes. So just to give you a sense for how much power it's delivering. And so instead of using the energy through the turbine section that spins the rotor, instead of using that energy to create thrust like you would on an airplane, we're turning a generator just to make electric power from it. The term gas turbine, actually it's a fun little fact. The word gas doesn't apply to it doesn't mean natural gas. It actually refers to the ambient air. You're taking in air, compressing it, and then you ignite it to increase the enthalpy and expand it through the turbine section. The gas in gas turbine is actually the air. It's independent of the fuel you select for it. So it is ideal for these stop-start applications, less than 10-minute starts, as Krista mentioned. being able to load follow. So as the demand on the grid changes, this aeroderivative gas turbine was designed to lift an airplane and cut thrust when you're landing. So these types of changes in the grid are perfectly accommodated by this type of gas turbine. It's why it's been chosen by so many utilities. And then lastly is its ability to accommodate hydrogen that we've been talking about. So in Sedalia, Missouri, we're actually getting geared up to do a lot of this hydrogen testing. Across the United States, we've seen other power plants testing hydrogen blends. This being a transition technology, one that facilitates renewables, having a long-term solution, a carbon-free fuel solution, is also very important when you're deciding which technology to implement. And we're here to support that. The LM6000 is not a new gas turbine in that it has been around for a long time, I think roughly 36 years since it's first deployed, but it's continued to evolve. It's continued to get more efficient. The power output has increased over that time. But what that means is we can trust in the reliability of the gas turbine because it's proven itself. It's got over 41 million operating hours accumulated out in the power industry today. So it's a technology that you know when it's time to start it, it's going to start. And that's one of the most important things, particularly in a situation where you might have an extreme weather event and it causes a blackout. This facility, and we'll see it in a couple slides, this facility has black start capability. That means if the grid goes down, we can actually re-energize the grid by using that black start. And so you want to make sure that gas turbine starts when you need it. And so having 41 million accumulated operating hours gives you that confidence. And over 99% accumulated reliability in the field. What's unique about Pro Energy is when we use that LM6000 technology, we actually get an existing core, an existing engine, and we overhaul it in our facility in Sedalia, Missouri. So we're what's called a level 4 service depot. It means we have the ability to take this gas turbine, tear it all the way down to a nut and bolt level, clean, inspect, repair, replace, build it back up, and then offer the same guarantees and the same warranty that a brand new gas turbine would. That's partly why we're able to offer this plant at a much more competitive price than another supplier who's offering a similar technology. The neat thing about it being an aeroderivative and having it have been on the wing of a 747 is if you flew on that plane, you probably trusted your life with an overhauled engine. So those aircraft engines are actually overhauled frequently throughout their life. And those processes that guide that overhaul process to ensure reliability are the same processes that guide what we do in our depot in Sedalia, Missouri. So that same level of quality control goes into it. It also has the nice benefit that we're not having to do additional runs of steel. There's a lot of precious metal in this, and the more we can leverage, the more we can reuse from the original, it means we've reduced our carbon footprint. You haven't exercised the steel mills to the same extent in choosing to reuse it, so that it's an important part of why we've built our whole business around this philosophy. So the core, the engine is rebuilt, but what we've done as a company is we've built a new package that goes around it. So the transformers and the supporting system that goes around it, that's new and fabricated in Sedalia, Missouri. It's the core and the generator portion that we're overhauling. So as a company, we've put all our eggs in this basket. We believe that utilities all over the world are in need of peaking power, and they're in need of it so that they can reach their renewable energy goals in a timely fashion. So they need to have that grid resilience. The LM6000 in particular, we've done over 100 overhauls of that gas turbine in our shop. We've done the turnkey installations of 75 of those gas turbines, and then in the last 2 years, we've actually put in 1,800 megawatts, which equates to 26 of these units, and it's the exact same unit as the 2 that we're talking about for IPL. This is just a quick snapshot of what we've been doing in Texas since the beginning of 2020. We've got 26 of these LM6000s. If you look at 2, that's what's being proposed for IPL. Why are we putting all these in Texas? A lot of it has to do with how much wind has come online in Texas in the last little bit. They've really ramped up their efforts to increase the amount of wind in ERCOT. ERCOT's the grid down in Texas. And in doing so, they require technology that's able to come online to back up those wind turbines. And that's why we've been able to be successful installing these. This H.O. Clark facility was the unit that came online just in time for Winter Storm Uri. So it ran for 8 days straight, keeping the lights on in Winter Storm Uri. And again, an important part of that technology selection is if you have an extreme weather event, a battery storage system might get you 4 hours. We had to run 8 days to make sure that there was power available to nursing homes and hospitals and provide that level of grid resilience that we know is required, especially in the face of climate change. We know extreme weather events are going to happen. We know they're going to happen more often. So we have to make a technology selection that supports that and creates a reliable grid for our citizens. There's an additional plant coming online. It'll be online by March of 2023. It's another 6 LM6000s. All the same gas turbine that we proposed for IPL. So specifically for IPL, it's roughly enough power to satisfy 91,000 homes. And compared to the existing Blue Valley gas turbines that are there today that run on some liquid fuels, we're consuming 44% less fuel. So again, it means every time we dispatch this gas turbine, we're not dispatching something that's less efficient. And compared to coal, it's 50% fewer emissions, both from a carbon perspective and overall emissions. And so this is the plant. This is the plant that we're considering here. You can see the 2 LM6000s in the front, the storage containers here. The particular facility that we've proposed for IPL and as specified by Power Engineers is a dual fuel facility. So when we talk about being able to run and having resilience, one way to improve that is to allow the plant to run on either natural gas or diesel. Diesel only in the case of an emergency. If gas is available, you run on gas. But in doing so, it means we have some fuel storage, enough to last 4 days. And then this is actually water storage to support some of the water that goes into the gas turbine. So what we're looking at, the ambient air comes in here through the inlet filter house. This down here is the package where the engine sits, compresses that air. It's ignited and expanded and turns the rotor. And so the generator is making power. And then on the back side, this big piece of ductwork you see there and this stack, that's the emissions control system. So the unit's been quoted with what's called a selective catalytic reduction system. It reduces NOx, nitrous oxide. It also has a CO catalyst, carbon monoxide. It reduces CO. So in doing that, we're able to offer industry-leading emissions for this facility. We're cleaning up the downstream emissions. Another nice benefit is that gas turbines actually have a net positive impact on particulate in the air. So the filtration as it comes in, we're actually cleaning smog and particles so that on the outlet side, there's actually a very small amount of particulate matter, less than what went in. So it was always an important part of this project, was ensuring that we had state-of-the-art emissions control on the back of the gas turbines, which acts to reduce emissions both in liquid fuel operation as well as natural gas operation. This is the substation we're tying into. These are the transformers that get it up to the line voltage. So when it's transmitted down the street, it'll go out at a much higher voltage than we produce it at. That's what the transformers are for. And the key here is you look at the footprint. We're able to squeeze all 91 megawatts onto this small area right here. So the energy density is unmatched in the industry in terms of what you're able to produce with the size available. The other key is the schedule. And so we've been one of the few suppliers in the last 6 months or so here that's still been able to complete these projects on time. There's a lot of global supply shortages going on at the moment. We're unique in that we're coming off the heels of executing those 26 units, actually 29 units, and we have another 6 coming. So we've faced the challenge of trying to build power plants during COVID. And now we've got the crisis over in Europe that we're trying to deal with, and it's had a really unique impact on supply chain. And so being able to stay on schedule, we're uniquely qualified to do it, just given what we've seen and what we've had to deal with. And so just to summarize, the focus of our business is on this gas turbine. We've standardized the solution. We use this overhauled core. As a result of doing that, we're able to offer the lowest installed cost. The technology that we've selected has proven reliability behind it, and it's the ideal enabler for IPL to continue to add renewable resources down the road so that you can be sure that you've got backup generation available. So that was what I had. That's just a shot of one of our plants down in Texas there.
Well, thank you very much. The real reason we're here is to answer your questions. We do have some questions that were submitted in advance that we're going to start with. There's baskets and cards available around the room. If you haven't had a chance to write out a question, we do ask you to submit the questions in writing so we can make sure we get it right as well as keep a record of it. If you need a card, raise your hand and one of our staff will get it to you. If you have a card you'd like to turn in, same thing, raise your hand, one of our staff will pick it up and get it down to Meg, and then we'll get started. John, I'm going to turn it over to you to take the questions and direct them, and with your experience in Springfield, feel free to take a shot at them yourself.
Happy to do that. Jim, did we decide we're going to read them from down here?
Yes, I'll read you the questions from down here. We do
Right.
have several that have been submitted via social media, so we'll start with those and then we'll get to the cards that we've received tonight. So our first question, what is the total cost, including gas and staff time, of 30 years worth of generation expressed per annual megawatt? Contract purchases would include all costs of generations, including staff time.
Well, a really good question. Obviously, cost is a central component of all of this, probably only second to keeping the lights on. That might be a question that came up as part of your study.
You might have to repeat the question, actually. It was kind of hard to hear all of it, if you don't mind.
What is the total cost, including gas and staff time, of 30 years worth of generation expressed per annual megawatt?
Do you remember if we...
Per annual megawatt. We worked on a net present value basis, looking at the cost per year. If I remember that's per megawatt.
Perhaps the question really is, if you're comparing this to other sources of power.
Sure.
Maybe that's a good way to start the answer. If there are other questions that come out of that, or if that particular questioner doesn't get exactly what they're looking for, we can follow up on that, but that might be a good way to start.
Sure. So using the net present value basis that we looked at pricing, year over year, what that does is roll into all the costs of operation of the plant, of the fuel, of the labor, the O&M, and that rolls that into a common number. And when we did that for all of the cases that were proposed in the RFP, the Pro Energy case was evaluated as the lowest cost option.
And what number would you have attached to that?
So the net present value basis, thank you. I can't read it from here.
Is that 28,000 per 20? So 20,000 per
megawatt.
Okay. And again, if there are follow-up questions to that, we'll see if we can't refine that a little bit.
What would it look like if instead of replacing with new technology, IPL replaced with purchase agreements?
Say that last part again.
With purchase agreements, replaced with purchase agreements.
I would just add, is that in there? Yes. Okay. Now, if this is a question online, we're going to need to say what that is unless somebody's watching online, which they might be.
These are questions from social media that we received prior to tonight, so we'll go through those first.
Yeah.
How is IPL helping people use less energy?
Say that again.
How is IPL helping people use less energy?
I'll take that one as the IPL person up here, I guess. We do have programs that will assist homeowners with doing home improvements, we have a low-interest loan program that people can apply for to do things like insulation, replacement windows and doors. We also have a rebate program for energy-efficient HVAC systems that you can apply for. So those are the programs that we currently have, and the information on those is available at our table as well as on the city's website.
Discuss your evaluation of batteries as a portion of the energy portfolio.
Say that again.
Discuss your evaluation of batteries as a portion of the energy portfolio.
Okay, so I think that is just basically how were batteries evaluated as it relates to the needs of the system, and that was previously discussed, but you guys may want to add to that.
Yeah, like what I was going to say was the batteries were evaluated as part of the portfolio. The megawatt ratings and the capacities and the footprints and all the considerations of trying to get the amount of power that we're looking for from just purely batteries didn't pan out as a standalone technology. However, the technology that we are recommending of the gas turbines can be and have been paired with battery energy storage. There are these types of projects going on in other parts of the country where batteries are being used in combination with gas turbines or recip engines to provide the quick start, the less, as Landon was saying, it takes 10 to 15 minutes to get a gas turbine up online. And so in an interim basis, some utilities are coupling batteries with the gas turbines. But in this case, we did not get a proposal, or did we recommend that we put the two together. And so for right now, we don't have a proposal on hand that gives us both.
Yeah, and I just add to that, I think batteries perhaps hold great potential for the future. I like to think about electricity as push button or otherwise. This is a push button solution. Somebody pushes a button, these units come on. If we're ever going to have a electric grid and a transmission grid and an overall energy system where wind and solar are synonymous with push button electricity, it's going to have to depend upon batteries. That technology is probably not as far along as we would like for it to be. The folks down at the end of the table talked about a 2-hour discharge or a 4-hour discharge. And while that might help in those hot summer afternoons, it's not a complete answer. The technology is simply not there yet. And I think the fact that there wasn't a proposal put forward probably suggests that battery technology isn't quite there yet. 10 years from now, will it be? Don't know. But right now, it's probably just not a mature enough technology to solve the problem that Independence Power and Light is trying to solve.
IPL has lost money 7 out of the last 10 years, and their reserves have dropped from $174 million in fiscal year 12 down to $40 million in fiscal year 21. The reserves dropped by $35 million last year. IPL is on a downward, unsustainable financial trend and will be out of reserves in the next few years unless there is a rate increase or some new source of revenue. What does the short and long-term financial viability of IPL and effect on the ratepayers look like, given all the potential changes that are being considered?
One of y'all want to take that for me? There have been some up and down years. There have been some years where we were able to come out adding to reserves. There were years that we lost from reserves due to different capital projects or things that were going on. Last year was a perfect storm of conditions. A lot of things all happened at the same time. There was the 6% rate reduction that the council approved. There was the $11 million rebate back to the ratepayers that the council approved. We had the extraordinary costs of the winter storm that hit. We had we still had a suppressed demand due to the COVID economy, where businesses just weren't operating as much and people weren't using as much electricity. We actually saw about a 5 to 6% decrease in load over projections due to that downturn in the economy. In addition, the last couple of years have actually been mild weather. We all remember some cases that didn't seem so mild, but in general, we had fewer what they call degree cooling days, which is how much air conditioning you're using, and likewise the winters had fewer degree heating days. So we saw about a 5% decrease in projected load from those. All those things, all those factors hit the budget at the same time. So last year was an extraordinary year, and we are working to recover from that. Going forward, those are discussions that we'll have to have with the council and the Public Utility Advisory Board, balancing the performance of new systems like this proposal, seeing how the economy continues to recover, where we can shift capital projects for the best protection of the reserves. But those are discussions that we'll continue to have with the Public Utility Advisory Board and the council.
What were the underlying assumptions that IPL used in the development of the IPL proposal to determine the future revenue projected to be generated by the sale of excess energy to Southwest Power Pool over a 30-year period?
Yeah, so one of the things that was done as part of the analysis from the net present value is actually to model the units in a backcast format. So using historical SPP data and using the heat rates presented in the proposals, we were able to understand what the unit dispatch and energy generation would have looked like over the last 3 years. And so that information was used then to essentially generate the revenue or present the revenue that would have been developed by those units, and that was an input to our net present value analysis.
I would like to add, as part of that analysis, it was a very conservative approach. As he said, we took the actual market conditions over the last 3 years within the SPP market. And understand, Southwest Power Pool schedules all the generation. Southwest Power Pool looks at what the most efficient, cost-effective, or other criteria that they have, and Southwest Power Pool calls you and says, we need that unit turned on at this time for this many hours. We took that actual market data and plugged these units in to see how they would compare. We did not include the winter storm event. We figured most statistical analysis, you will throw out the extremes on either end and look at what the core numbers are. So considering that an extreme event, we did not include those numbers. So the numbers we came up with, which was about I think about $2.5 million of additional revenue that we could generate opportunities from these units, that didn't include any potential extreme events like the winter storm. Also, it just happens that we looked at the last 3 years. 2018 was the last hot summer we had, and that wasn't included in the numbers. So these are a conservative estimate of what the market opportunity might be, and it's only based on the generation profile. Southwest Power Pool also calls on units for other reasons. Sometimes there's congestion. You can't get the power from the western plains out across Kansas City, so they want something on the east side to pick up that load. Sometimes they need somebody on to help support voltage and frequency on the grid. Those opportunities aren't captured in that, and even our existing units get called on for those reasons as well. So we're comfortable that the $2.5 million approximately, that's a conservative estimate of the market opportunity that these units present.
Yeah, let me just add, Jim, I think based on recent, and in some cases very recent data, some as recent as last week, in the market to the east of here, the Mid-Continent Independent System Operator, it's the SPP of eastern Missouri and on further to the east, and even some proposals that we requested on behalf of some of our members last fall. It appears to us that having excess capacity in today's market is going to have increasing value over time because there are fewer and fewer assets available. In this country, we're retiring coal assets very rapidly, and we're doing it for principally environmental reasons. And that's well and good, but the most important thing that IPL and every one of our other members and every other utility out there has to do first is keep the lights on. So the excess capacity that's going to be available here, as the market gets more and more restrained, likely have greater and greater value going out into the future. That's not something that you can say with any sort of exact calculation, but I've been in the business 39 years, and that's what's happening, and I think everybody up here would agree that that's the case. And the process that IPL went through, along with their partners, to be very conservative in that, which is what you would want them to be, is probably going to pay some pretty rich dividends out through the next decades.
This is a two-part question. Could proper maintenance and the continued use of IPL's existing 6 turbines enable or allow IPL to meet its generating capacity obligations to the Southwest Power Pool for a long enough time to permit new generating technologies to mature and come to market? If not, could third-party purchasing agreements be used to fill gaps that develop as those turbines cease to be operable for financial or safety reasons?
A question you want to take a shot at?
I'm not sure I can answer that.
I would say that the existing units are increasingly getting, the maintenance costs on those units and the reliability of those units is decreasing further and further. And one of the reasons for looking at this opportunity now is to utilize the SPP process. I think this process has been looked at by IPL for many years, and having this opportunity would allow that transition to occur while these units are still in a condition that can support it. But that's not something that's going to be available for the long-term future. So I don't see that these existing units are something that will bridge the gap long enough to get to a technology that might offer this, capacity that we're looking at this time.
I was going to add on the existing units, each machine has a rating or a capability, and the SPP looks at those machines that IPL currently owns and based on testing has an accredited rating. And so there's some lost opportunity with the existing machines that for example, some of the machines might be rated 38 megawatts, but based on inefficiencies and age and the fact that they can't produce that reliably, the SPP sets the accredited rating at a much lower rating. And so there is a potential with the new engines to be able to deliver more power at each substation location up to what the SPP's expected rating is. And so that's one component of the evaluation of the existing CTs. I'm not that familiar with the second part of that question about the purchase contracts, and so I might need some help answering that part of it.
For the last 2 years, that's the position we've been in, is continuing to maintain our existing turbines and using purchase power agreements to make up the difference. This past year, we had significant failures on 3 of those 6 turbines. Combined cost of those 3 was in excess of $2 million to put them back into operation. One of them is still not back, probably won't be till summer because of the availability of copper. So that's a risk you take. The purchase power agreements themselves, and the purchase power agreements, right now we have purchase power agreements with the Iatan plant and the Nebraska City plant just to give you some comparative numbers, for 58 megawatts of capacity and energy, we are invoiced over $120 million a year. That's for 58. Because you're not only paying for the capacity and the energy produced, you also are paying on the cost of their plant. You're paying for their operating and maintenance costs. You're paying their fuel costs. Those are all added. So even though energy from coal contracts right now may be averaging $17 to $19 a megawatt hour, by the time you add in all of the other costs, which are significant, like I said, the total for this past year was $128 million for 58. This project will be approximately 90 megawatts, 84 in summer conditions, for roughly $70 million. Obviously, that you have to include your debt expense and such, but very stark comparison between the cost of the new versus what purchase power agreements cost.
If the purchase power agreements are available. And as I just mentioned, increasingly those options are more limited.
Should the IPL proposal go to a public vote, especially considering the high cost of purchasing the 2 refurbished turbines, the questionable likelihood of accurately predicting future expenses and revenues for 30 years, and the high volatility of current and future energy prices?
Should it go to a public vote? That's a decision for the council. They have the authority, the responsibility to make those kind of decisions. If they wish to take it to a public vote, that's the council's call. I will say that the time it takes to schedule a public vote, get the ballot approved, and hold the vote, you will not be voting on a proposal like this. You will be voting on an idea, because no quote is going to be valid long enough to get through that process. So what will happen is the public will have to vote on whether or not they want to do something like this, and then once it's approved, we would have to go out and get new bids under whatever the market conditions are at that time, and then come back to the council with a contract proposal. But it won't be this project.
Let me just add some personal experience. I worked at City Utilities in Springfield for 20 years, 9 of it as the general manager. And during my tenure, we had a proposal to add a 300 megawatt second generating unit at one of our existing power stations. Not unlike taking this project and putting at an existing power station. That decision was made because of the size of the debt to take it to a vote of the citizens. It narrowly was defeated. That was in 2004. We spent 2 years, not unlike how long this has been studied here in Independence, and put it back on the ballot in 2006. The cost that we had in 2004 ended up costing the customers of City Utilities $120 million in increased construction costs. Now, that was a second coal unit. These are aircraft engines bolted to the ground. They're different kind of proposals, but I think the point that Jim is making is we obviously know what's happening with inflation right today. We obviously know that we're in a real transition in the business, and getting really efficient. Efficiency of these kind of units is measured in heat rate. How many BTUs does it take to make a kilowatt hour or a megawatt hour of electricity? You're getting a lot more efficiency with these new units. But what that cost would be by the time a vote is scheduled and by the time you take proposals at that time is likely going to be higher and maybe much higher. Folks to my right might be able to quantify that a little bit. That's only one personal experience that I've had in my 39 years in the business.
It is evident that IPL will need future rate projections to provide to prospective lenders when the city borrows the money to purchase the 2 refurbished turbines. The City Council will need that information before it can prudently authorize spending such a large sum of money. IPL ratepayers are entitled to know what the purposed turbine purchases will cost ratepayers in the future, and voters will need that information in order to make an informed decision in any public vote on the proposal. So why does the IPL proposal not include a professional rate study that shows future rate projections and identifies the study's underlying assumptions?
We do have, currently we have a firm that is doing a update to the financial model. Included with that will be an updated cost of service study to determine just what costs do we need to cover. That would then lead into a discussion of rates. For this particular project, we know that assuming the current bond market, the debt coverage for $70 million is approximately $4.3 million a year. That $4.3 million, we've already had questions about IPL's reserves. Even if we're breaking even, then obviously there's not room for another $4.3 million. So it'll have to come from somewhere. That will be a discussion that we'll have with the Public Utility Advisory Board and the council. There are a number of different possibilities we could use, but it would be debt that would be, the proposal is that it would be debt that would be financed, and then we will have some mechanism to help to cover that debt service, part of which would be the increased market opportunity of these units. We do not foresee an increase in operating costs because essentially these units would be taking the place of the 6 that we currently operate. And so the same personnel, the same maintenance folks, they would still be the same. We don't foresee any increase in manpower necessary for these 2 new units to come on. Again, those are discussions that we will have with the Public Utility Advisory Board and the council before they make the decision.
How much will it cost to develop a substation to support the North Point project, and how much is the estimated annual revenue projected for IPL from the North Point project?
With all due respect, the purpose of this meeting is to discuss the new generation proposal. The North Point is a whole nother ball of wax, and other groups are working on that, so we'll pass on that one.
Former Councilman Huff suggested it would be cheaper to contract with Dogwood for added capacity, and Councilman Steinmeier seems to support atomic energy as an alternative energy source. Would either proposals be cheaper and better than what is being proposed?
Did y'all hear the question?
Yeah, Dogwood is an alternative to this.
So Dogwood, one of the things that is IPL already has the power purchase agreement in place with Dogwood. One of the things that was recommended by a previous firm was the issue of putting all of the eggs in one basket, so to speak, of having all of that capacity in one, excuse me, one entity. The reason for that being if maintenance cost goes up, if there's unexpected outages, those costs are seen and not spread out across multiple entities. On the atomic or nuclear side, small modular reactors are starting to become, a more prevalent technology. In some ways, it's being reviewed by the DOE and other firms. It's not there yet. It's going to be some time off before those types of units are available, and other nuclear sources are just, not being permitted and are much too large for this type of application.
I told Councilman Steinmeier, with my background, I'm absolutely in favor of nuclear power. I did that for many years in the Navy. The small modular reactors that you may read about, There's a company called NewScale that is in the news a lot, another firm called Oklo that are developing small modular reactors. We're talking 50 megawatts down to 15 megawatts. I'm not sure how you make 15 megawatts nuclear economically viable, but the real answer to that is none of those are permitted yet. NewScale just got its first permit to start looking into a test facility to prove their design. They're working with the state of Utah. I'll be very interested in how that progresses, but any nuclear power and independence is many years down the road. As far as you mentioned Dogwood, one of the lessons learned coming out of the winter storm was the value of spreading out your assets, in having a diverse portfolio that doesn't rely too heavily on any one area. If we were to add this same 90 megawatts of power in additional shares of Dogwood, that would put over 50% of our capacity in one resource. That doesn't exactly fit the recommendation of keeping a diverse portfolio. In addition, again, when you talk about purchasing additional shares of ownership, not only do you have the energy cost, you've got all the operating costs, you've got the debt service cost, and the 85 megawatts, is it 85 that we currently have with Dogwood? I believe 75. The shares of Dogwood we currently have on an annual basis already cost us more than what this proposal does. So again, that's an option. This is a lower cost option.
Yeah, let me just put another plug in for diversity. If you happen to look at this map over here next to the big MPUA sign, that shows the various generating assets that MPUA has to serve 50 plus about 5 other municipal utilities around the state. We're partners with Independence Power and Light, some of those same projects, and said very simply, don't put all your eggs in one basket. The first job is keeping the lights on. The first job is reliability. So spreading that risk is a big deal. And the fact that you can do this at a site that is already in existence and cuts a lot of time off the process to permit an operation like this, this is a really good solution.
I've heard that we could make money off our extra capacity. How would that work? Can we still run the proposed units for our needs within the city if we do that?
So extra capacity can be, so the SPP market works on a basis of market pricing, and units that can operate at the price that the market is paying can sell into that market and generate extra capacity. So that is one way that extra money can be made from assets that are available. The issue with the units that IPL currently operates is that their efficiency is not very high, and so the market price that allows them to make money on extra capacity does not occur very frequently. The market has to reach certain extremes, weather events, things like that, for that to really be an option.
One way that we can potentially generate some extra revenue off of this proposal is if we build this proposal and put 90 megawatts in there at substation A. That doesn't mean we have to immediately retire the other 6 units. As long as they are functioning, as long as they're economically viable, no major repairs, we can keep those online, and that would then be excess capacity that we could offer into the market. So instead of us having to go get a contract with Oneta, we have somebody else that would contract with us for a share of our capacity. That capacity market right now, we did an evaluation based on current market rates within SPP and estimated that a capacity contract for that same 90 megawatts would cost us, I don't have the number in front of me, But it was a significant amount of money that could potentially be raised off of selling that capacity. In the news that just came out this week, MISO, the Midwest Independent System Operators, as John mentioned, they're to the east and north of us. MISO does an annual capacity market, kind of a clearinghouse auction. Normally it closes at, and I'm not, the units don't worry about, but the market usually closes at values of $3, $4, and $5. The most recent capacity auction in MISO closed at $250. They've seen a 40-time increase in the cost of capacity within their region. Part of that's because we've had excess capacity for a number of years, and based on that, everyone was given permission to go ahead, close their coal plants early. A lot of these plants have come offline, and now MISO has been caught by surprise. They're actually short on capacity for their summer load, and so that cost has gone up tremendously. If we were to have excess capacity, that's a potential market opportunity for us.
What will happen to electric rates when this much debt is added?
Well, again, that's a discussion we'll have to have with the Public Utility Advisory Board and the council. Just some rough math. If you were to increase every utility bill, 59,000 electric bills in Independence, if you were to increase every bill by $5 a month, that would be a total of about $3.5 million a year that it would raise to support debt service. You know, where we are for the total, again, we're going to be reviewing our current financial model. We'll be looking at our cost of service, and we'll be able to make adjustments as we go, but we'll be presenting those to the PUAB and the council, and those are decisions that we'll have to discuss.
How will more industrial development affect rates?
You want to talk about the benefit of industry?
Well, I mean, the answer to that is it's hard to determine exactly what the impact would be. But it's certainly true if you're running an electric system like Jim and his colleagues are, and in many ways all of you are, when you are able to attract manufacturers, principally manufacturers, who are very efficient users of electricity, that helps drive down the overall cost of operating the system. Think about, we call it load factor. Think about it this way: if an airplane flies out of KCI and it has 100 passengers on it, the same exact costs, maybe weight, a little bit of an impact on fuel cost, but if it flies out with 50 passengers on, it obviously costs more per unit to do that. So the more efficient a manufacturing customer is, if they're a 24-hour-a-day operation or even a 2-shift operation, they're going to be using energy a lot more efficiently than a residential customer is. Actually, it's true that additional industrial load of high load factors helps drive down the overall cost of operating the system, and therefore everybody benefits.
Please explain how a purchase of this magnitude is financed.
Say that again.
Please explain how a purchase of this magnitude is financed.
Well, I suppose it'd be wonderful if there were $70 million available and you chose to take it and buy them for cash. Nobody does that. They're financed with debt issuance. Bonds are issued into the market. That it's no different than a mortgage on a house. It just happens to be a very, very nice house. And you pay it back over 25, 30, 35 years, whatever the choices are that are made. There's an interest rate, obviously, associated with that. So it's really no different than a mortgage on a house or a car payment. It's just a lot more money. And you know, some houses are financed over 30 years. I don't know the specific plan here, whether this is a 25, 30, 35-year program, but it's really very similar to houses or cars.
We've been talking with the city's financial advisor as we've gone through some of the other bond repayment issues and looking at what how those work. There are options. One of the options is that you can finance the initial stages with basically a construction loan and kind of a pay-as-you-go. As the bigger ticket items come up and the larger payments are necessary, then that at some point, and our financial advisors would work with us on this, but at some point then you take that construction loan, what you've accumulated up to a point, and then you determine what your actual bond amount is that's necessary, and then you issue debt to cover the rest of that cost. Again, 25, 30 years is common. I will say though, we have our finance department does an outstanding job of monitoring those debts, and as you've seen over here just the last couple of years, where the opportunities have presented themselves, they've taken advantage of market changes to restructure bonds, to reissue bonds, to pay off bonds early, and that certainly I would expect would continue to be the practice going forward so that we maximize the efficiency of that debt.
How could the lawsuit affect rates?
Say that again?
That's mine.
Okay.
How would the lawsuit affect rates? Obviously, we don't discuss any details of lawsuits that are in process. Those are being handled by the city manager's office, and we'll know as we get further into those cases.
What has to be done to restore the reserves to sustainable levels?
What has to be done to restore the reserves to sustainable levels? A number of things. One, we have to carefully evaluate any and all capital projects to see what is absolutely necessary, what can be, what are the must-haves versus the nice-to-haves. We continually evaluate our operating and maintenance costs, looking at staff evaluations. Just this past year, we've gone through 2 different reviews looking at our organizational structure, always looking for ways to do that more efficiently. Certainly our negotiations with our represented staff have an impact, but all of those things have to be managed and monitored in order to put us in the best position. If the decision or if the results of those reviews is that additional revenues are required, then we'll have to jump into that and figure out what different revenue streams are possible. Are there additional revenue sources that we could look into? But it's an all of the above answer. Everything's on the table.
This one is directed to Mr. Twitty. How many municipal utilities have merged or sold in the last 20 years?
Well, I'd probably have to look over here, 2 in that period of time. I would say that they are very small systems, and I would say further they have allowed their systems, their distribution systems, they haven't maintained them as they should, and it became necessary for them to sell.
I apologize. Landon, please speak more to the hydrogen option.
Yeah, so we are just one supplier who's investigating hydrogen right now. Gas turbines from many suppliers gas turbine suppliers of many all over the world are looking at hydrogen right now as a viable fuel alternative. So we in Sedalia, we have a test cell, and we've designed that test cell to accommodate mixing of hydrogen and natural gas and increasing in concentration. And through that testing, we're going to be able to prove out the concept of operating on higher and higher levels of hydrogen in the near future. The turbine as proposed today is capable of operating up to 30% hydrogen with the package as it exists. The restriction and the challenge is not in the gas turbine itself. The challenge is in the distribution and production of hydrogen. The main issue right now is it's difficult to get enough volume of hydrogen to make a meaningful difference. However, there's many fuel suppliers around the world that are looking at solving this, and lots of companies looking at locating hydrogen production adjacent to the power production. So make your own hydrogen to support the facility. So the aeroderivative gas turbine that we've used, it uses a SAC combustor, single annular combustor, and that's very well suited for high concentrations of hydrogen. As I mentioned, 30% out of the box, and many believe that it's capable up to 50% with only minor modifications. Part of our R&D effort is how do we take it from 30 and 50% up to 100%. That means you're changing the combustor, you're changing the fuel delivery system and going through those types of evolutions in the technology. But our goal as a company is to ensure that the technology is never the limitation in terms of how high you can go on hydrogen. We always want to make sure it's the distribution and the delivery of hydrogen, and that we're ready when it's available, we're ready to burn it. So I think, as many of you know, hydrogen is a carbon-free fuel. So every percentage of hydrogen you introduce to the natural gas stream is a percentage of CO2 that you're reducing on the emission side.
Will IPL require additional staff to operate these new turbines?
And we answered that earlier. No, right now we are not projecting any additional staff necessary to operate or maintain. The existing staff would pick up that responsibility.
Adding these will affect what percent of our current base load coal consumption?
How would it affect our baseload coal consumption? The electricity market is not the same thing that it was 20 years ago. Right now, since 2014, when we joined SPP's integrated market, we purchase all of our energy consumed from Southwest Power Pool. Then any generation that we contribute is added to the pool's supply, and then we get credit for that. Southwest Power Pool is scheduling higher and higher percentages of wind and solar. On the website, spp.org, they actually have a dashboard there where you can see up to a daily update on how much wind and solar are in. Here recently, on a given hour in the afternoon, they hit over 90% of power generated being supplied by renewables. The percentage in the portfolio overall is still down in the 30% range. There is a graph, a chart that we got from the Department of Energy Information Agency. It's projecting that out to 2050, it'll be about 38% renewables and 36% natural gas in the generation, or contributing to generation out to 2050. So natural gas, right now I think it's about 37%. It goes to 36%, so it's fairly stable piece of the puzzle going out. Yeah, you can see the graph there. The green is the renewables, the gray is the natural gas contribution. So it's going to be a significant player at least through 2050.
So we have reached the 8 o'clock hour. I'm going to ask 3 final questions, and then we will work with staff to provide answers to the remaining questions. First of the final questions, what do you do to mitigate the noise from the turbines?
Melissa, can you pull up we've got a nice chart that shows the predicted dBA levels that the plant will produce. The gas turbines have, as I mentioned, the catalyst systems on the back end. So that's a chart that just shows relative dBA values. Yeah, if you can pull up the actual noise contours. So the catalyst systems on the back have a natural attenuating effect just by reducing noise as it passes through the catalysts. And then in the base of the stacks, there's 2 stages of silencing baffles. Think of it kind of like a muffler on a car. And so your primary source of noise is from the top of the stack, and it radiates outwards. What that plot shows there is that at the property line, we're at roughly 65 dBA, 70 dBA, and it's less than 55 dBA at the nearest residence. So with those silencing systems installed within the stack, as well as shrouds around some of the vent fans that are installed, we're able to achieve those noise levels. And then Melissa, if you can flip back to the other chart just to give a sense. 65 dBA at the property line is a casual conversation. So just to give you a sense for how loud that would be, you could stand at the road and have a conversation without the need of a microphone, and you could hear each other just fine.
Has there been any analysis of long-term impacts on community and environmental health of bringing new gas generation online that would impact independence for decades?
So I think that's been a theme of the night. A lot of it has been about enabling renewables, being part of the solution as opposed to it being a step backwards. In terms of local health impacts, that's the purpose of the catalysts that have been installed on the backside. So the limitations that have been set by the governing bodies that are telling us the nitrous oxides and carbon monoxide levels that we need to meet, we're surpassing those limitations, we're outpacing them in order to ensure that we're meeting all the regulations, and the regulations have been set based on governing bodies that are concerned with public health and safety. So, Jim, I can't speak specifically whether a study was done for this plant. I can speak generally about the fact that we're meeting all of the codes that would ensure public health and safety.
We have not done a study as described there, but what I can tell you is the improvement over our existing resources is substantial. So it's substantially reducing the amount of pollution per megawatt of generation compared to the existing units that we have now. And the more that we are able to operate units like these, the less Southwest Power Pool will call on coal and diesel units. So we're helping in the overall picture with the operation of these units.
And the final question of the night may have already been answered, but we'll clarify. Can you please explain further how this plant would reduce particulate matter or other air pollutants?
And it's based on the filtration in the inlet filter house. So it has very fine filters in order to ensure that we're not causing damage to the gas turbine. It has the inherent benefit of removing that particulate then from a public health and safety perspective. So fortunately, Missouri is not an area that has a lot of smog, but there's been studies to show that in very smog-dense areas, that particulate matter, it's measured in size of the diameter of the particle, PM10 and PM2.5. These gas turbines are actually serving to reduce smog levels in those regions. So when people think about pollution from gas turbines, most of the time they're talking about CO2. From the perspective of particulate matter, it has a net positive impact based on the potential smog or particulate that's in the ambient air already. So natural gas is a very clean burning fuel and doesn't inherently add to the particulate. We're only reducing it by means of the filtration that's on the intake.
Well, thank all of you very much for coming down to help us out tonight. And thank all of you for being here to help us with the questions. And I hope if you didn't have your questions answered, you can still reach out to us and we'll try to get some answers to you. But thank you again for your attendance, and we appreciate your interest.